Okay, welcome to part 2 of the Intro to Testing and Administration PowerPoint for today. We last left off at the experience and training status of an individual, as well as age and sex play a factor in different types of test selection. So let's continue on. Let's talk about environmental factors next. So high temperatures and high humidity can impair performance, pose health risks, and lower the validity of aerobic endurance tests. We kind of know this from other classes and other things you've been learning, but that is a very important thing to still note as you go along each way. Temperature fluctuations can reduce someone's ability to compare test results over time. So for example, if you tested someone and you wanted to do a 3-mile test in 95-degree heat, as well as with 80%, 85% humidity, and then you retested them in a cooler weather and not as much humidity, are you going to get the same results as long as the training status was the same? So you have to make sure take temperature and the environment into consideration. So altitude can impair performance. We've talked about altitude a bit, and you've talked about altitude in other classes on how that can affect especially aerobic performance. Definitely aerobic endurance tests. Not so many on strength and power, because again, strength and power uses non-oxidative energy systems, right? So we don't use the oxidative system with the anaerobic glycolytic pathway as well as the phosphagen system. So altitude may have little effects on that. All right, so let's make a summary statement. So what affects an athlete's testing performance? Let's just make a couple general statements. An athlete's experience, training status, age, and sex all affect testing performance. So those factors should be considered when going to assign a test. 2, environmental factors such as temperature, so extreme heat, extreme cold, humidity, the altitude, rain, all those other things should be taken into consideration when testing. All of those can influence test performance. So testers should try to standardize the environmental conditions as much as possible. Okay, so let's talk about a little bit more about health and safety considerations. So let's be aware of testing conditions that can threaten health of athletes. So let's talk about high heat and humidity. This is that big one, especially for preseason fall athletes when they're coming in beginning mid-August. So football players with a lot of pads on, their helmets on, also can trap the heat, and you can't dissipate the heat as well as you normally could. So that really needs to be taken into consideration when doing testing. Be observant of signs and symptoms of health problems that warrant exclusion from testing. So luckily, we as a whole and coaches are getting better, and as long as there's more athletic trainers and strength and conditioning staff on with these athletes, it's better than it used to be. So back in the day, it used to just be the coaches doing this, and they did not know how to look for signs and symptoms of heat exhaustion or so forth, or to keep someone out of testing, right? And actually pose more of a risk for them because they want this quote unquote push the athlete through it, push through it. Well, you can push through things to a certain extent, but then you're actually going to be endangering the athlete's health and actually possibly life when it comes to heat stroke on certain things. Make sure you're observant of the athletes before they started training or before testing, during, and after these maximal exertion type of tests. Okay. So during the weeks before the tests, what should the athletes do? They should engage in enough training to establish a baseline of fitness in the activity being tested. So most athletes know what they're going to be tested on going into, let's just say, preseason, right? So they should be starting to train in order to be prepared for those tests. Avoid testing under extreme combinations of heat and humidity. On days when the temperature is high, indoor facilities should be used, okay? Or testing should be conducted during morning or evening hours when it is cooler. I will give you all an example. When I was in undergrad and I was playing soccer, we had our preseason. We had to do a 3-mile run. None of us were prepared. We did not know when the time of it was going to be. All of a sudden, my coach just made the decision, hey, we're going to do the 3-mile test now. Go get your sneakers. It was at 1 p.m., 95-degree heat, and about 80% humidity, and you could see the haze coming up off the ground. Most girls got heat exhaustion, heat cramps, and were actually getting sick off to the side of the field. So My coach was not well educated on what should have been done and what safety considerations should have been taken into consideration at that time. Okay, so we want to be weary of that. And if you see coaches doing that, and if you're on the strength staff or you're an athletic trainer or so forth, if you see a coach, well, I'm going to do this test at this point in time, that's your chance as the professional to step in and say, you know what, this isn't the best time to be doing this test. One, you're not going to see the best performance from the athletes, and two, you're going to increase the risk of hurting their health, right? So it's okay for you to step in and use your expertise in this case, so to protect the athletes, and you want them to perform their best as well. Okay, so if you are going to test in the heat, the athlete should be acclimatized to the heat and humidity for at least 1 week before testing. So if they're going into this environment, they should be at least there for a week. Athletes should make sure they're well hydrated in the 24-hour period preceding the aerobic endurance testing in the heat. Athletes should be encouraged to drink during the exercise in the heat as well, not just before and not just after, but throughout the day and throughout the testing as well. They should be constantly rehydrating. Athletes should wear a light-colored, loose-fitting tank top and shorts, preferably of some sort of mesh or breathable material. So one of those heavy 100% cottons, nope, no good. You want to make sure you're telling the athletes they're wearing breathable material, sometimes mesh-like tank tops if you're going to be in the heat. Proper attire is very important too if you're going to be testing in the heat or exercising in the heat. So you as the professional should also be looking for these type of symptoms, right? Heat stroke or heat exhaustion. If someone says they're cramping up, that is your first sign. That's like, okay, take a seat. Let's get some water in. Let's get some stretching in. Let's get you into a cool environment. Cramps is going to be your number one indicator that they are starting to go down that path of heat exhaustion, okay? Some athletes won't tell you because they want to push through it, and they don't want to seem like they're, they can't hack it, so to speak, right? But if they start to then we'll continue on with nausea. They start to feel dizzy, difficult walking or standing, so they kind of like wobbled a little bit. They feel a little bit faint. They have a little bit of garbled speech, lack of sweat. So now we're getting to extreme ones. If they're a little bit confused, garbled speech, if they stopped sweating, that means their body's mechanism in order for us to sweat and then dissipate that heat has shut down. So they have gone... So ultimately, your hypothalamus is shut down at that point on controlling heat dissipation mechanisms, and that is not good. So the skin will then turn red, and then sometimes they'll even get goosebumps. They might even get chills when they're so heat exhausted. Your hypothalamus has lost the control to determine heat dissipation and heat conservation mechanisms. So that's very important to be on the lookout for. We never want it to get down here, right? We only want it to be... If someone starts to have cramps, get them in a cool area, let them sit down, have some water, put some cold cloths around their neck, and, have them take a break for a while. All right, so continuing on with the heat. So different symptoms like hyponatremia or water intoxication. This is extremely dilute urine, bloated skin, altered consciousness, loss of consciousness, no increase in body temperature, right? So this when someone's drinking too much water, right? Okay, so it's extremely diluted, so there's not enough electrolytes going back. We're urinating out too much of the electrolytes that we need in order for us to perform muscular contractions, right? Proficient medical coverage should be always readily available, okay? So we also want to make sure we're looking at no increase in body temperature, okay? So test administration, different testers and forms. So if we're selecting and training of these specific testers, provide testers with practice and training. So if you, the strength coach, the athletic trainer, or the coach, whatever, need help with doing these testing, first of all, you should be very organized, okay? And you want to ensure consistency among these testers. So you must train your assistants to help you measure the tests that they're accurately supposed to be measuring, because again, you want accurate results. So you want to provide your testers with practice and training. They shouldn't be coming in doing this the first time and never have done this before without a few run-throughs when you go ahead and and now is where it counts with the athletes. So different recording forms, make sure everyone understands your way of recording and how you want the data written. I would make sure you have all of those data forms organized, printed out, so all they have to do is write in things to help you out. You want to prepare scoring forms ahead of time to increase the efficiency and reduce recording errors, right? And you want to maintain high levels of organization, right? If an athlete sees a coach or a testing person is unorganized and they're fumbling with papers and they're like, oh, what test is next? Or, oh, what am I supposed to do? The athletes aren't going to take them as seriously. So when they're not being taken as seriously or you're not being taken as seriously, what do you think the athletes are going to do? Do you think they'll maybe show their maximal potential? Possibly not. So you want to be taken seriously and be organized and make sure that the athletes know this is a serious time. We need to do some high intense exercise testing. So organization is key. Organization is even key if you're working with the aging population or say someone who just wants to get back into fitness. If you're kind of all over the place and you're like, I'm not sure, we'll probably do this or we'll probably test that. They'll be like, well, should I be coming to you? Are you the expert that I want? Versus you coming in, being like, okay, these were what your goals were. I have a plan for the day. What do you think about that? Then people are like, okay, good. Yes, they have a plan. They want to help me. So it goes across the board for all different types of populations, not just elite athletes, but all the way down to someone who just wants to improve their fitness in general. All right, so the testing format. Consider whether athletes will be testing all at once or in groups. Are you doing group testing or individual testing? The same tester should administer a given test to all athletes if possible, right? Remember we talked about intra-rater and inter-rater reliability. Each tester should administer one test at a time. Okay, you want to ensure accuracy and it's being carried out to the best of their ability to ensure the best results. When we talk about testing batteries and multiple testing trials, duplicate test setups can be used for large groups, but the things you need to allow are at least 2 minutes of rest in between attempts that are not close to the athlete's maximum capacity. So tests that aren't testing someone's max. So, their 1 rep max, their aerobic capacity, you at least need to allow 2 minutes rest in between. At least 3 minutes rest in between attempts that are close to maximum, right? So now we are actually pushing the athletes a little bit further, maybe not completely to their maximum aerobic or anaerobic capabilities, but we're getting there. So you want to allow a little bit more rest time in between those tests. And then lastly, you want to have at least 5 minutes between test batteries. So a section of tests, a group of tests, and then another group of tests, right? You want at least 5 minutes in between so then the athletes can recover a bit before going to the next group of tests. This is going to ensure that you're going to get your best results. All right, so heading into the last couple slides that I have for you guys today, just as this intro PowerPoint, let's go talk about the sequencing of tests. Now, this is important, and if those of you who want to take the CSTS exam, sometimes they will give you different tests, say like a push-up test, and then a 1RM test, and then a jump test, and a 100-meter sprint test, so to speak. And they will say, what are the order of tests that those should be in? They'll give you an agility test of this or that, and then you'll have to choose 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1, 4, something like that. So these are the order of the tests that, the NSCA has deemed that should be put in this order. Non-fatiguing type tests like BMI, weight, height, all those type of things, skin folds, body composition. Then we go next to our agility type of tests, maximum power and strength tests, our sprint tests, local muscular endurance tests, fatiguing anaerobic capacity tests, and then lastly, our aerobic capacity tests, right? So where we're giving maximal effort for our aerobic energy system should be tested last. Right, so let's summarize a key point. The order of the test should be designed in such a way that the completion of one test does not adversely affect the performance in the following tests, right, or the subsequent tests. So if you were to do a max aerobic endurance test and then wanting to do local muscular endurance, those are going to be affected. So it's important to keep that order in mind and those rest periods, be cognizant of those rest periods in between of what, is it maximal effort or submax effort? So then the athlete gives you their best results. All right, so lastly, when you want to prepare your athletes for testing, want to make sure that the coach or you are announcing the date, time, and purpose of the test battery, which is that group of tests, in advance. Host a pre-test practice session, so a lot of the athletes will have a lot of jitters. Provide clear and simple instructions. Demonstrate proper test performance. Organize the pre-test warm-up. Tell athletes their test scores after each trial, and administer a supervised cool-down period. Okay, so those are all things that the athlete should be aware of before heading into a testing day. All right, that's all I have for you for the intro to testing and administration. And next we will be moving into more specific tests of agility tests, sprint tests in general, and what they are. All right, thanks everyone.